So if you are joining us, we logged in a couple minutes early just to give everybody a minute to um, log on and to set up watch parties. I'm Lauren Van Amert from RDU on Stage. And this is my partner in crime, Kim Jackson, who has been with RDU on Stage from day one. So that's exciting. This is my partner in crime, Kim Jackson, who has been with RDU on Stage from day one. So that's exciting. This is my partner in crime, Kim Jackson, who has been with RDU on Stage from day one. So that's exciting. This is my partner in crime, Kim Jackson, who has been with RDU on Stage. So one of you has the volume on?
Fixed.
Okay, perfect.
That was okay, because I was trying to figure out why I kept hearing Lauren over and over again.
That was me. Yep, there you go.
Okay.
I wasn't talking. And I can do my little plug now for what's happening tomorrow. So that way, once you guys start talking, you guys can just talk through and finish it up. If obviously, if you guys have any questions as you're watching and following along, just type them into the comments and I'll make sure that you all get them. And tomorrow I have Amy Kirk Jones from the Women's Theater Festival.
Amy Kirk Jones.
Freak show. She's worked on a couple of Bear productions, has she?
Yes, and she's done stuff for me with Seed Art Share. She did Miracle Worker.
Well, her, I received some photographs of the set design for Freak Show, and they look amazing. So I'm excited to talk to her about Freak Show tomorrow, and then Kim and I, we have a colleague in New York, Edward Medina, who is really, really interesting. He's worked as a train engineer for Disney World. He's worked for Jim Henson, I'm really excited to talk to him. He's a writer, producer, director, theater critic, so I'm excited about that. And he will be with me tomorrow night at 7. So we've got about 1 minute to 8 o'clock. Kim, I can toss it to you and you can introduce your guest panel here. And I will log off. Have fun, everyone. Behave.
All right, we'll try.
Yeah. No promises.
No promises? Well, everyone, thank you for being here. I am very excited to talk with all of these creative elements from the Marat Sod production. Dustin Britt, who is the director. Al Riggs, who's the music composer, correct? And I have some really interesting questions for you. And then Kaplan, who was our marquise de sade. So, 3 of you are very, very busy locally here in this area, which is really cool. Dustin, you've done a number of productions with a lot of the local theaters. Simon, you have too. Both of you are very kind of well known around here. Al, this was your first was this your first dabbling in some theatrical stuff with the production of Marat?
No, I worked with Dustin a couple of years ago on his production of The Miracle Worker.
Ah, okay.
The musical director and band leader.
All right.
We used a collection of songs from the era and formed a little band of myself, Joe Wimberly, and
Kelly Parton, Benjamin Tarleton, and Aya Wallace.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
They were great. They were really
just kind of a skeleton crew band, and we just kind of, I don't know, would you call it like a Greek chorus kind of thing?
Greek chorus / party crashers.
Yeah.
I tend to insert music in shows where there wasn't music. So doing Marat Sod was perfect because there was music in it already.
Yeah.
Right. Well, but let's back up just a little bit. So this is this is the 1963 play by Peter Weiss, right?
Mhm.
But you couldn't use the original music, from my understanding, from the show.
So
Yeah.
here's how the story
You
went.
brought it out.
Yeah, so here's how the story went. Dustin was in contact with the publisher, and I was on the way home from work. I was originally going to be just the musical director, and just assuming we would have the score. And I'm on the way home from work, and I get a phone call from Dustin saying, "So we have the rights to the play, we have the rights to the lyrics, but we did not get the rights to the score. So do you want to write a new score?" And without even thinking about what I would end up having to do, I was just, sure, why not?
And so it began.
And so it began.
The complexity is that, believe it or not, this piece isn't considered a musical. It's considered a play with music, which
Right.
is silly. There's
It's a
16
musical.
songs in
It's
it.
a musical.
It's a musical. But the publisher that owns the rights to the sheet music, the notes on the page, is an opera sheet music company that does not own the rights to the text. And the company that I buy the rights from the text from has no ownership over the music. So it would be paying royalties to two companies
Places. Wow.
to do it. And it proved to be very expensive and very complicated. And Al, how did you feel about the Peter Brook production score?
So you make it sound like we've talked about this. You don't drink coffee. What are you doing?
It's a meme.
I'm younger than you. I should be teaching you about memes. I hadn't seen the original production, but I saw the original film, which was directed by Peter Brook. And the score, it's not that I dislike the score. The score is very good. It is very ornate, is very complex, but I always felt like, since the story takes place in a insane asylum, these people would not have the mental capacity
Or
training contextually to perform or even compose this kind of music. It has a lot of changing tempos and key changes, and all of it very rapid and everything. So I decided, well, if like, thinking of people in mental health care facilities, like, they're probably not being, energized. They're probably not, writing this kind of complex music. So I thought, well, what would it sound like? And it eventually just became more of dirges and chants and very rhythmic, angry sounding music.
Right.
Except when it's hilarious.
Except when it has to be a goof.
Yeah, well, and also because there's points in time where it almost sounds a little frenzied, like everybody's kind of like going, oh, they're kind of bouncing off of each other almost. There's an element of that. And so at what point, Simon, did you get roped into this, and how did you feel about, you're playing the Marquise de Sade, this like very infamous historical figure?
I had heard from Dustin, I think toward the end of last year, that he was going to be directing the show. I was in a production of it as a student, as an undergrad, decades ago. So I knew the play. And I had worked with Dustin as an actor, but not as a director, and wanted to, work with him as a director too. And this play was coming up, and I thought, oh my God, this is too good a role to turn down the opportunity, the chance to play him. And unusually for me, I did back to back. The rehearsals for Marat started while we were still performing the final week of a show at Raleigh Little Theatre, Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime.
Which was
Normally, I love doing that play.
That was an intense show. Very.
Yes.
So you jumped right from.
Yep, from one intense show straight into another.
Yeah.
Normally I take like a month off between plays just to decompress and to get to spend some time with my wife. But this, like I said, this was too good a chance to not to audition. So I auditioned, and unusually that process involved Dustin sending us some extracts from the script to memorize, rather than just showing up with a monologue of your own choosing. Right. Which was a little bit daunting. It was, oh, this is different. Okay, oh, I hope I know that my lines weren't perfect by any means in my audition, but I got most of them.
Oh, you were fine.
Yeah, I know, but I wasn't perfect. I knew I wasn't perfect.
So where did you get a bit of? Yeah, you adopt a certain posture for him throughout the show. I mean, I call it this bemused disdain, and it really becomes sort of like the marionette of everything, and it's sort of like, even when it looks like everything's out of control.
Yeah, that's
Sort of still has it. It's sort of like
when Simon auditioned, he and to kind of explain the reason for the having to read a piece from the play and not something out of the person's book, is I don't like callbacks.
Okay.
As an actor or a director, I think that 90% of the time a callback is to be really sure, when in fact you kind of know what you want. I'm of the theory that I don't need to test chemistry, because if you can act like you have chemistry, then it's real to an audience. And if you can't act like you have chemistry, you have no business being on the show. So I'm not worried. I'm not casting Romeo and Juliet. So my thought was, forget the callback. Let's just read from the show now.
If someone looks like they're going to scream all of their lines, you don't really need a callback. You're just,
that that's what they're going to do.
Yeah.
And in this show, some people needed to scream all their lines. I also had this weird thing of Al and I decided to ask actors to bring in an instrument, any instrument, even if it's a rattle or their own tummy, or in Simon's case, a clarinet, and play whatever you want at whatever skill level you have, so that we could figure out what their skill levels were. This prevented the need for a music callback. So, as having been an actor who has wasted hours and hours and hours of my life sitting at auditions, waiting to go in, waiting for callbacks, I said, forget it. I don't run that way. I knock it out in a couple of nights. People know by the end of the week we're up and running.
Right.
Simon did this lovely thing where he came in and did a Marat Sade that was a very grotesque, kind of pot-bellied, slimy, just like, oh God.
like hedonistic.
Yeah. And then I said, all right, now let's flip it. And he immediately took on this kind of Oscar Wilde-ish, closer to what you see in the show.
Kind of a Hannibal Lecter.
Hannibal Lecter crossed with Oscar Wilde.
Yeah. I was going to say, it's like he's charming, but it scares the shit out of you.
That's it.
Yep.
If you don't kind of want to hang out with him, it doesn't work.
But except he fascinates the hell out of you.
Yes.
It's like, that was what was so, I was very, very taken with that performance of this like character of like, I'm not supposed to like you and I really don't, but you're charming and scary and you seem to be manipulating everything.
For those who don't know, let me explain really quickly what this play is.
I was just going to say, we should probably back up and you should do that. Thank you.
So the full title pretty much tells you what the play is. The Persecution and Assassination of Jean-Paul Marat, as performed by the inmates of the Asylum of Charenton under the direction of the Marquis de Sade. It's right what it says on the can. It is a bunch of inmates being directed by the Marquis de Sade, who has written a play. He is also an inmate at the asylum. This is right after the first French Revolution, before we go into the second. And they used to allow de Sade to write in stage plays because it would kind of keep him calm and give him an outlet so he didn't get carried. So he would write plays on toilet paper and things like that, which we have in the show. So this is imagining what if the Marquis de Sade wrote a play about the real life revolutionary writer Jean-Paul Marat, who was really assassinated by a girl named Charlotte Corday. What if the Marquis de Sade wrote a play, a musical about it, and directed a bunch of inmates in how to do it? And then what if the director of the asylum brought in the public to show off their art therapy program? That's the basis of this show.
The premise.
The meta text of the Marquis de Sade doing a play, and within it you have this play about Jean-Paul Marat that is constantly being interrupted by the fact that the cast aren't particularly good or professional, and things tend to get in the way and things start to grow out of hand. So the Marquis de Sade is kind of this central figure.
See, and I came into it, I was very unfamiliar with what I was walking into.
As is everyone.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like,
Most people.
wait, we're kind of the audience, but we're kind of also a part of the show.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, oh, and it was interesting. But the other thing that was really neat to me was that they acted like inmates without being stereotypes. Like you really kind of skirted that. And then Al, your music, it kind of mirrored how these people were kind of responding to what what they're supposed to be doing and what they want to do and what they don't want to do. So
yeah, that was very intentional. That was trying to write character into a score where I didn't think it existed before.
Right.
Many of the songs are just giant chunks of text. Many aren't even assigned to a character. So it was Al and I going through every page and saying, where do we need music? Where do we not need music? And who's going to sing these lines? And then Al, you've never had to work with someone else's lyrics before.
No.
Was that restricting?
No, it was actually easy. It was actually easier because it was as easy as music for my own stuff, because I could just look at text and bang on a piano for hours and figure out what was going to work. The songs came very quickly. I wrote them pretty quickly. I wrote them mostly the final version that were the demos that were sent out to the cast were the first take for the most part. I wanted the score to sound rough and very tangled and handmade, and something that could easily be turned into something bigger later on, but I didn't want to overthink what I was going to be doing.
And we didn't know what kind of musical capabilities our cast were going to have.
Exactly.
You're composing for this imaginary band who may or may not play any instruments at all. We're thinking, oh God, we're going to end up with 4 ukulele players. We got 3.
We got 3 ukulele players.
And
but
a clarinet player. So
one thing,
if you play the clarinet a lot?
right?
No.
One thing we decided early on was that the Marquis de Sade wasn't going to sing. He wasn't going to do a lot of singing. He's putting his words in their mouths. They're saying his thoughts. But then we had this idea that what if he's kind of a Pied Piper?
That's what I was just going to say, the clarinet. That became
so the clarinet, God, there's a thing. The audition that Dustin mentioned a few minutes ago was the first time I'd played my clarinet in public for 30 years or something. I was just nervous up the wazoo. It was ridiculous. It was just, because I was making some music come out of this tube that was in my mouth in front of some other people. It was crazy that I was so nervous, but I was just...
Well, it's wild how music works that way, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I go to an audition and I emote and I recite and I feel the feelings and I say the words and it's fine. I don't get nervous for those, but make me make music in front of people and so played the clarinet in my 20s, and then my clarinet was stolen. And I never got another one until a couple of years ago when I mentioned to my wife that I would love a clarinet for my birthday. And she came through. That's what she got me for my birthday. Thank you, Claudia.
Thank you.
And so when they said at this audition, you need to play an instrument, I'd played it a little bit. I'd had a few lessons, but nothing, you know, I hadn't like learned any new songs and certainly hadn't performed in front of people. So they said, yep, play clarinet at the audition. And I did a version of Wyatt Earp, the old TV show.
Oh my gosh.
And some clarinet, some singing. And, you know, it was like the words weren't perfect in that audition and nor were the notes, but it was good enough for these two guys sitting here.
Yeah.
When and in fact, you were better prepared than I really required. Because
now he says,
Now he tells you.
no, and I said
it's all about hiding the praise so you don't feel too good about yourself.
Right. Well, part of this was saying I wanted to see people not do a monologue or a song. There's 16 bars for their audition they've been doing for 20 years.
You type 5.
Because I know you can do that because you've been cast in shows. So I know what that looks like. I don't need to see that. I need to see if I give you something kind of messy. I gave them like 10 or 12 speeches from the play to choose from. And I said, I don't care which one you choose, which also gave me some insight into which character was speaking to them. I knew what Simon was going to do before I knew there's one I put in there. I was like, I'm just going to do that one.
And were you right?
Really great. I loved the audition process because people brought in some people banging on lids, and we had people with melodica. We had all kinds of
people.
stuff.
We had people with
pill shakers, which became part of the show.
We had Mark.
We had Mark Wardell, who came in and said,
it was like Mark.
Talking about Mark's audition.
So it's me, Katie, and Dustin, and Mark
Judge,
stage manager, yeah.
And Mark comes in, and none of us. Mark Wardell, who's a wonderful, wonderful man, and he's probably watching this. Hi, Mark. Hopefully, I don't know. If I were him, I wouldn't be trying to think about this play right now. But he comes in, and none of us know who he is.
He's never been on stage.
He has never been on stage before. He has never been in a production. He comes in and nails the monologue, and he plays his version of one of the songs.
He wrote his own music to one of the songs.
Yeah.
You're kidding.
Yeah, and it ended with screaming, and we did the very polite. Okay, that was very good. We'll see what happens. Thanks for coming. He leaves the room. I turn around to Dustin, like, where the fuck did he come from?
Oh my god!
Like, was he born out of a tube?
Which speech did he do? Do you remember?
He did Marat he did one of the Marat in the bathtub speeches.
Okay.
Yeah, he did a speech in the tub, and
okay.
It was shockingly real, which is all I really wanted from y'all, is to be. And what I got with this cast, and I'll brag on my cast for the first of many times of the evening, is that they're fearless, sometimes to a point at which I wonder if we're okay. But they're fearless, and they're brave, and they're trusting of each other and of me and of themselves, which many of them weren't trusting of themselves, I think, when we started. So I think where we got lucky in the cast is working with us is it is a very yes and kind of cast. Okay, let's try this. Okay, it feels weird. It sounds strange. We might cut it, but let's try it. And the answer was always yes.
If anything sounded good from the music, it was 90. I say this with no ego whatsoever. It was 90% the band taking what I had written and deciding, well, what if we do it like this? Or what if this part's louder? Or what if this part's really noisy? And blah, blah, blah. They really became a band, and they really started to work together to the point where I didn't have to show up for practice. I didn't have to show up for rehearsals.
You handed it off to Mark.
I handed
the
it. I had
assistant MD.
Yeah, we made Mark the assistant MD, and I was just being told, okay, this is what was working, this is what was working, and this happened with Miracle Worker as well, where we eventually got into the point where everything started to run very smoothly, like a band rehearsal, and at a certain point, everyone just picked everything up.
Well, Al doesn't music direct musical theater. Al runs band practices,
Right.
and runs band recording and runs live concerts. So
Yeah.
the method of, okay, I'm going to play you the song and let's figure it out. I mean,
I'm still trying to figure out how to be a good music director. I'm not like aiming for self-deprecation here, but I don't consider myself to be a very good music director. I was talking with some friends of mine about the musician Captain Beefheart, who
Unconditionally Guaranteed, great album.
yeah, exactly, made the album Trout Mask Replica, wrote everything on a piano, which he didn't know how to play, and then played all of the songs for his band, who, you know, played guitar and drums and bass and everything and saxophone, like played it all on the piano, which he couldn't play, and then said, okay, now do this. And he couldn't understand why you couldn't just play these bass notes on a piano. He couldn't understand why a bassist couldn't play the exact same notes on the bass guitar.
Why can't you hear what I hear and
Exactly.
make your body do it?
It's like, no, I'm doing it. You should be able to do it. You're more professional than I am. You should understand how this works. And my biggest flaw as a music director is I oftentimes assume that people know what I'm talking about when I'm describing what something is supposed to sound like. And eventually I have to rewrite my own language when it comes to talking to people, which, you know, now that I'm saying this out loud, I'm kind of getting out a lot of demons about just personally, like how I speak to people.
Tell me about your relationship with your mother.
But it also seems like you allowed, you gave some musical direction, but you allowed some of it to then kind of emerge organically too.
Exactly right. Exactly right. Yeah.
So in that sense, I think you were a good musical director, because that's what this show kind of needed, that sort of initial direction, but then you allowed each of those characters to kind of make that music become a part of their character, as opposed to you didn't impose music on the character.
No, Al didn't write parts. Al wrote melodies.
Right, but the melodies matched, and they added something. They just
I appreciate you saying that. I mean, that's also like when I perform my own music with my own band, or whoever I'm performing it with, I always lay down the law, like, here's the songs, here's how they begin, here's how here are the lyrics, this is where the singing happens, this is where there's no singing, here's kind of the skeleton of what the song is, and you can do whatever you want apart from that. I encourage improvisation because that's how I write. I write completely of the moment, first thought, best thought. I try not to hammer stuff too hard, because then it doesn't sound interesting, then it doesn't sound fun, and that's how you get music that sounds like a slog.
Well, especially when you have characters that are playing the music.
Yeah.
It's not that Jessica Fleming is playing music, it's that Jessica Fleming's character, Cocole, is a musician.
Yeah.
It has to play like Cocole and sound like Cocole. So
Exactly.
that organic process is interesting. So Simon, talk about us trying to figure out arrangements without sheet music or like keys.
That's the other thing. I don't know how to read or write music notation.
well, and then I was just even thinking, here you are writing this music too, and you don't even know what instruments everybody's going to show up with.
Recorded that. Yeah.
Kind of like,
When was the score finished in terms of when we started rehearsals?
98% of it was finished weeks before we finished being written
okay.
Yeah.
for auditions.
Okay.
But until we got closer to auditions that the demos were recorded.
Yeah.
Right.
All right.
Okay. Yeah.
Since I mean, I always work best with a deadline.
Yeah.
I love it. So Simon, talk a little bit about your character, the Marquis de Sade. What were some of the things that you felt like you brought into when you were doing it, and how maybe you worked with Dustin to develop his whole posture and the way he was?
Yeah, he is probably the single most odious character I've ever played. It's a little bit of, I don't know whether to say the fortune or the misfortune to play. He gives me the chance to dig out some really just horrid parts of myself that are there, and it would be dishonest of me to pretend that they're not. And having the chance to explore that in the safe sort of space that Dustin and Bear Theatre, under whose auspices we did the production before, the safe space that they set up is a fantastic gift, because with any less sensitivity paid to what yucky stuff the actors were going through to just be honest in terms of the portrayal. I'm thinking particularly of the relationship between Sade and Corday.
Yes.
Corday is basically Sade's little toy, little puppet. It's a deeply abusive relationship. And the exercises that were set up so that Rosemary and I felt safe, Rosemary Richards, who plays Corday, that felt safe and heard and to some weird extent comfortable with the icky stuff that was going on between us. I forgot where I started this sentence, but it was good to have that structure in place to let that happen.
A not sensitivity.
Intimacy.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You used an intimacy choreographer.
For this production, Dustin?
Tara Nicole Williams did the intimacy for Timon of Athens, because there was a number of things that needed to happen in that.
Right.
And then I knew we were going to need one for this. I cut every scripted instance of any type of physical sexually abusive contact, which does occur throughout the script. And I felt, and when I was saying this out loud, Al agreed with me, is this play doesn't need to be shocking and it doesn't need to be triggering. And what is the play about?
Well, it doesn't need to be shocking. It doesn't need to be cheap.
Right.
And and not to speak for you, but I've always found that when filmmakers and screenwriters and play directors use sexual assault to further along a story
Or to manipulate the audience's emotions.
It's a very cheap and easy way to manipulate the audience's emotions. It's basically saying, we don't trust you to feel a certain way based off of the script or what's already happening. So we're going to throw in this random bit of nightmare.
Right. Can we not just empathize with the character because we understand that Desaad is abusing Corday and that Duperret is abusing Corday? If we're given that information, are we not capable of empathy? And I think audiences are capable of empathy. So I don't think we need to see a lot of sexual assault happening, at least not in this particular play, because it's not what the play's about. I think there's a place for it. I don't
Right.
think this is the play. So I cut out most of it, but what did remain were these moments of eye contact. And I'll let Simon speak to this.
Yeah, those were intense.
Called Heather Strickland, who is the goddess of all things.
She's great.
She was my Annie Sullivan. She has done fights for me. She's my go-to for all things. She's a wonderful mentor and performer in her own right. And I said, could you come in for a couple of rehearsals? Because she's very busy. And I said, and work primarily with Corday, played by Rosemary Richards, and Desaad, played by Simon, as well as Duperret, played by Jill Cromwell, who is a patient with sexual impulsivity issues.
Right.
And Simon can kind of speak to what the intimacy process was like for this show, because it wasn't as much just about touch.
It wasn't about touch at all, because I mean, although I'm in my character is in close proximity to Corday, more or less the entire show. I only touch her.
I just said, don't think
twice.
You ever do, and yet there's this intense connection.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, the intimacy was, I don't know. It's I have to imagine stuff, and that is invasive.
Yes.
And so I, several times in rehearsal, as soon as a scene broke, and I would apologize to Rosemary for just being having to hold these horrid thoughts toward her. It wasn't comfortable. It was and I'm glad that we have a defined physical step that we take, which was part of the process that Heather had us work with, where when we're about to enter the world of the character, we do a certain thing with our hands, touching. And when the scene is over, either in rehearsal or at the end of the play, we do it again, and that breaks that connection, and we're back to being friends, Simon and Rosemary.
I got lucky in that I had actors even though Rosemary is very young, to find actors of such maturity, and empathy. I think empathy was the key. It's not, and like Simon said, it's not just how am I feeling, it's how is my scene partner feeling. And I think when we're focusing outward on the other person in the scene, I mean, this is acting 101, when you're focusing on the other person,
right,
it tends to work better. And I found that the relationships between the cast as actors and as characters that are being intimate in tending to be violent ways. Most of these are not moments of love and consent. That they're so in tune with what the other person's feeling, it's made my job very easy.
Yeah.
I think you're actually selling yourself a little bit short there, Dustin. I think the tone of the whole thing, you set that, and then we fed into that, but it came from you.
Right.
One
I mean,
thing
you set up
happened.
that whole, you had to start that whole process of creating the safe space
Mm-hmm.
so all of the actors could then delve into these very deep, dark places to bring up what they needed to bring to these characters.
I knew from the start this was going to be challenging.
Yeah.
It's not a pretty play. And I'm very sensitive as an actor,
Sure.
the way I behave with other people. Also, there's a lot of physical violence. So, Benjamin Tarleton coming in as our fight choreographer, he and Heather, of course, worked brilliantly together, because what we found out with this play was where fights and intimacy end and begin was all kind of mushed together. And it's like, where does choreography?
It's all consent.
Yes.
It's all consent.
Yeah.
You do something with someone else that involves breaking some kind of personal boundary, emotional, physical, mental, that involves consent. That is 100%, whether it's miming some kind of sexual advance, or in our play's case, a incredible roundhouse kick to the face.
Yeah.
Very true.
It looks very real, and there are times where I watch it and I'm like, oh no, that actually happened.
One of the very last rehearsals. There was a scene that Simon and I were we couldn't quite crack it. It's very near the end, and Dasad has this very lengthy speech that describes a lot of sexual violence. And we tried it many different ways. We tried it in different places. Let's do it in the bathtub, or let's do it over here. We couldn't quite figure out why because it's an icky speech. And I think Simon and I were trying to figure out, and then I realized the question we needed to ask is, why is it here? And what's the character trying to accomplish by saying it?
Right.
And I don't think we were able really to come to terms with the playwright that this speech needs to be here. So what we did was Simon and I and the cast all together as a group said, how can we as a cast, as characters, respond to this speech in a way that makes it honest, but in a way emotionally lets the audience off the hook and lets the cast off the hook, because they don't want to hear it. So, I mean, Simon can speak more to this about the solution we came up with, but that was a moment in which I realized
brilliant solution.
I realized that the collaboration between me and the cast and Simon, it just went, oh, that's what this is. Simon can talk.
I'm trying to think if I know what scene you're talking about.
I'll be right back.
Okay.
If we're running the show again in July, I don't want to spoil it for people.
I know.
In terms of, in general, we found a way that perhaps if the cast reads a subtext that the audience doesn't know about, it can allow us as actors to process what's happening in a way that protects us and protects Simon and protects the audience.
Okay.
So inventing a subtext that the audience may never be aware of, but we found that we were able to find a deeper meaning to it that justified its existence to us. Because Simon and I were like, just get through it, cut it, do something.
We couldn't cut it.
And now it's worked. It works, and it's a strong.
I know what scene you're talking about, but you can't cut it because it's sort
I
of.
can't cut anything. I can cut whole scenes, but I can't cut speeches.
Yeah, but it's also part of who the Marquis de Sade is, though. It's kind of his defining.
Right.
And the way,
of course, because we know who he is pretty damn good.
We do, but this really kind of like makes it like.
Wait a minute! I don't think I like this. This guy doesn't have a good sense of character.
Sitting here for 2 hours, hadn't figured it out.
Really, it kind of gives it an added, it just sort of brings it all to a head, though.
I think it actually ties the I suppose there is a narrative thrust of the thing. It ties the narrative thrust together in a very neat way. It does. It just makes sense. Like if you hadn't said that it wasn't really a part, that is pretty brilliant what you came up with. That's him again.
Well, thank you. There is not a ton of stage direction in the text, and what there is, I immediately ignore as my role as a director. Particularly something like this, like, okay, so here's the text, stage direction. It's a really nice suggestion. Okay, so anyway.
Yeah, I mean, there are some weird ones, like the 4 of the patients are taken upstage by 4 nurses where they start doing physical exercises. Right. Like in the middle of some speech, okay, well, whatever.
In 1968 in Germany, it was really clever and it was really avant-garde and it was really cool and everyone lost their minds. But a lot of the ignoring stage direction was taking out some of the pretension, some of the avant-garde for the sake of being avant-garde.
Which can be fun.
It can be fun, but it can also be a trap.
And distracting, yes.
So in getting rid of a lot of the stage direction, and really a lot of it's not there, is, Sod has, kind of 2 pages, or Marat has 2 pages, and there's no stage direction.
Not really anything that tells you what to do with the set either.
Sure, and doesn't tell you who they're talking to. So in the same case as Shakespeare, is you have all this brilliant language, but you don't know what to do with it. So for a director, it's a blessing and a curse.
Right.
It's, if I find the right actor, we can figure out what happens in the space, and you let the text do the work. I tried really hard with this to make sure that we were letting the text drive the blocking and the movement, not us trying to force the text to fit into some idea that I had, which is an instinct as a director I have to fight. I have this vision, yeah, but the text doesn't want to do that.
Right.
A lot of it was finding out, what do you do with 40 lines of verse with no interruption, and it's political sexual bullshit? What do you do? Yeah. And that's, you just start by saying it and see what feels right.
Seeing how the other actors in the scene react to it as well.
Right.
All of the cast are in the playing space the entire time.
Right.
The audience in this piece sits runway style.
We all have to be here.
Yeah, we're all here. And I think it may
it's called traverse.
Thank you.
Dustin, yes.
Thank you. So it may be even more in the round than it was when we do it in the new version. But with the traverse staging and the cast never leaving, the cast have to live in the world. The audience is in the asylum room with the characters. There's no division. So if an actor can't leave, that means that character must continue to engage with what's going on around them.
There's a chair, a bath, and a piano.
Right. What's great for an actor is I have 2 hours where I can really create and dig, how am I reacting to this music or this violence or this character, or when do I have nothing to do? What does that look like? So it's just as important, not just for Simon to figure out how is Desaad presenting it, but how is the rest of the cast reacting to it in a way that gives the audience the right amount of emotional weight. Right. Because the audience doesn't know where to laugh, scream, or cry. I prefer all at once. Because surprisingly, the longer we've gone in this process, the funnier I found out that the play is. I think that's not intentional.
Or that you've made the play. There are bits that are not bits that have become bits.
That have become bits, yeah. It's become more vaudevillian because some of it is very...
Like Rosemary holding up her decapitated head.
Right. Well, some of this kind of writing is so far up its own ass that you really have to make sure that you're not feeding into this, I am doing pretentious, very kind of Brechtian stuff.
This has meaning.
Take all the stuffiness out of it. And luckily I have a cast of kind of weirdos.
Yeah, I would not describe this as a stuffy production.
Oh, no.
But it's
not at all.
The interesting thing to me, like I said, I went into it very much not knowing what was going to happen. Not familiar with the story. I mean, I read up a little bit, but that doesn't give you a whole lot of like what's going to happen, right? And the thing was, at some point, I was feeling as trapped as the inmates of this asylum, and it kind of became a really interesting thing. It was like, oh, it's kind of like, and because of where I was sitting, it wasn't like I could just get up and leave. And it was like, well, I can't leave, and neither can they. And it just fed into this whole atmosphere that of the asylum, and then you could see how that would be feeding all of these people who were a little unbalanced anyway, and how that feeds into them, and then how the Marquis is then turning around and kind of manipulating all of their neuroses. And you could see him in the back. I could see you in the back. I would watch you as they were doing something, and you would watch, and the way your expression of like what they were doing it. And sometimes I could never tell is he really unhappy with it or not. And then it's like I realized I'm trying, it was just, it was that kind of thing. Like, are they supposed to be doing that for him or not supposed to be? And you'd always just have this expression that was kind of like very hard to read at times. But I just found that interesting.
Oh, good. I'm happy to hear that. That I don't know. It feels like I gotcha. You know.
Yeah.
For the audience, this very quickly becomes a play of what's on purpose and what's an accident.
That was what exactly. That was. At times I was going, wait, was that supposed
This
to?
character is crawling somewhere during someone else's. Now, is that because Dustin Britt directed it? Is it because the Marquis de Sade directed it? Or is it because the character is going rogue?
The character needs to go from here to here, so we might as well make it work.
My favorite thing to do when we did our first weekend run. So for those who don't know, we were set to run for 3 weeks at Durham Friends meeting under production of Bear Theater. We had to close after the first weekend because of the Rona. And people really liked what they saw. So we are glad that we're going to be coming back in July.
Mm-hmm.
But my favorite thing to do was to watch the audience watch the show.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen the show. I've seen the show lots and I love it. But watching the audience go from amusement to surprise to wonder to shock to disgust to just from every emotion that you would want an actor to have, the audience is having it, which let us know that the text and the production, the actors were doing their job. Is I have an audience that's going from this to and everything in between. So I knew it worked.
Sometimes it's good to have a confused audience.
Luckily, I don't think we surprisingly.
We're not necessarily lost, but just sort of uneasy.
Bewilderment is okay.
Yeah. Terrified bewilderment.
Yeah. And no one's walked out so far.
Yeah, but the other thing was, I also found it very intellectually engaging. Like these whole dialogues that were going on between Sade and Barat were really kind of fun to listen to. I mean, they were sort of like, oh.
A lot of that's the actors. A lot of it's the actors, because some of this stuff is dry as old toast.
It is, but it was fun to listen to.
It's when, as Dustin mentioned before, when you got a great scene partner, it's easier. And I mean, Natalie and I, we'd never met before the first rehearsal, but we quickly established a very mutually respectful and we like each other and we like working together, you know.
So have a tremendous chemistry.
Yes.
It was organic. It was, we didn't have to work on it. It just kind of, there it was. And we played. It was fun playing with her. And fun to be able to do it again too.
Yeah, Natalie Sherwood, I knew that I wanted to play around with the age and gender of the casting, which I did to a point where sometimes I can't even remember how someone was written. But to have a recent college graduate, the extraordinary Natalie Sherwood, who I think of as like this brilliant Bugs Bunny, kind of clownish, delightful, bright character, and said, I'm going to take one of the most physical actors I know. I'm going to sit her down in a cardboard box and say, stay there.
Right.
And see if that physical energy starts to manifest itself verbally, which it did.
It's a pressure cooker.
It's a pressure cooker. So I tried to give actors some challenges. I also, at one point during casting, and this really freaked out Natalie and Simon, I considered reversing the roles at one point and having Natalie play the Marquis de Sade. And then I was like, nah, they'll kill me. They don't want to do that.
They do kind of a True West thing.
Yes, to take it on different nights.
Well, it was the last show that I got to see before everything shut
Me
down.
too.
Me too.
Yeah, it was the last one. And so it was sort of like, oh man, and I was just disappointed that obviously it wasn't going to get to more people weren't going to get to see it. So now you get to talk about Great. It's coming back. It's coming
So
back.
there's two exciting things going on. The
Oh,
first
okay.
thing is we got special permission from the publisher because of the corona
Uh-huh.
to do a live stream concert version of just the score from this very house.
Mm-hmm.
So our 4 key band members and 2 vocalists on June the 24th, live on Facebook, are going to be live streaming all of Al's original score with their instruments and their costumes and all that. So you'll get to see for free, you'll get to hear all of the music, and you'll get to kind of start to get a feel for what the show is like.
Yeah.
Part of this was a gift to the people who couldn't see it. Part of it's a gift to us because we really want to perform it again. And then, though we planned that, we weren't sure if that was going to be the end of it. We now have confirmation that we are going to do a 2-weekend run at the end of July at St. John's Metropolitan Community Church in Raleigh. They hosted my production of Timon of Athens. So they're great, great friends of ours.
They hosted pretty much all the rehearsal as well.
Yeah. For Marat Sod. Yeah, they're wonderful people.
Great folks.
Vance Haywood over at St. John's MCC. It's part church, part community center. They have a lot of queer outreach. They're just a remarkable people, and they've opened up their doors and their hearts and arms to us. So the 2-weekend run, just so everybody knows, is the penultimate weekend in July. That's Friday, Saturday, Sunday nights at 7:30. And then the last weekend in July, which carrying into August, all the shows are at 7:30.
And Lauren can add this in the notes, I think, too, when she posts the video from this.
Right.
She'll also post that.
Tickets aren't on sale yet, but they will be. This will be the URL to get tickets once tickets are there. So this URL right now will take you just to the abyss. It won't actually take you anywhere functional.
It might take you to that guy digging.
It might be under construction, but our.show/Marat-Sod is where tickets will be. And that information will all be available. It'll be all pushed out on Facebook. The other thing that's exciting is that, so Bear Theater produced the initial weekend run and oversaw the rehearsal process. Now St. John's and I are co-producing the remainder of the run separately. So we have it's a separate production now. I have decided that for the benefit of accessibility, all tickets for this production are pay what you can. That includes $0. So anybody who wants a ticket gets a ticket, and it doesn't matter if you can pay for it or not. I'll take the hit. So we're going to be capping at 20 because obviously we don't want to have huge crowds together yet, even though it will be, getting into August at this point. We still want to make sure we're being respectful of everybody's psychological need for distance, whether or not that's a medical need. The good thing is that St. John's Church is an enormous worship room where we can really spread out and have the audience around the perimeter. No one has to be in front or behind anybody. Yeah. So it's kind of really perfect. But I think that people who can't afford to go to the theater should be allowed to go to the theater. So if you're someone who can afford a $100 ticket, give us $100 for your ticket.
Please give us $100.
If you can't afford anything for your ticket, don't pay anything for your ticket. If you want to drop a quarter in the donation box when you get there, then that's what I need from you. If that's what you can do, then that's what we want.
Right.
We're not doing this show to make money. We're not going to make money, and that's okay. So we want this to be as accessible as it possibly can be financially. So once tickets go on sale, it's basically a reservation and how much money, if any, do you want to, essentially it's a donation. And we'll also be collecting donations for St. John's for their various food pantries and various initiatives. They do really wonderful work. They provide showers and hygiene services and huge meals, and they just have really big hearts, and we want to make sure that we're helping them.
They've been really great to work with.
Yeah, they've been wonderful. I'm also in favor of paying actors, so I'll be compensating the cast as well. None of this is to brag. This is to call other production companies on the carpet. So yeah.
Or to call yourself a professional company if you're not paying your actors, right?
Sure, and this isn't even with a theater company per se. There's no LLC on this except the church.
It's very much an our gang.
This is our gang. This is guerrilla theater at its finest. But in the spirit of revolution and the spirit of taking on a financial system, which is very much what this play is about, is trying to dismantle a system that is oppressive of the poor. As I think we should all be able to come and see it regardless.
It should be theater, all art should be accessible. And I feel like the greatest thing about community theater, we're obviously not, Broadway, which is a tourist machine at this point. If I could get, on my soapbox a little bit. But the best thing about community theater, even like for someone like me who's not as invested in it as someone like everyone else on this panel, the best thing about it is that it should be accessible. It should be free, ideally, and it should benefit the community before anyone else. And I think it's the Bandcamp model. It's pay what you can. And from a lot of people's experiences, people do end up paying what they can, even if that's more than the set ticket price.
My goal is for audiences to come and hear the voices of these characters.
Right.
What happens when you give a microphone to the oppressed and set the aristocracy down in the room and say, all right, for the next 2 hours, you're going to shut up and listen. I want those. Now, that doesn't mean that the things they're saying are good or appropriate or that I agree with.
Speak for yourself.
That's true. You're so radical. But I think it's a story that should be heard and one that can be told. I wish we could stream it as well, something we fought for, but that we're not able to accomplish with this production at the moment.
It's also great we're doing it in a church.
Yes,
Mhm.
you
Yes.
don't have to follow any restrictions because we're doing it at a church.
Yeah.
Explain that to me. I'm not. What do you mean? Since you're doing
The churches aren't under any mandatory COVID shutdown.
Okay, this is the
stuff.
pandemic thing. I got you.
Mm-hmm.
So, not to say that we would abuse the privilege, but I may
Right, I got you, but it gives you a little more flexibility.
definitely. Hopefully, by the time we're getting to the end of July, we're not having to worry as much about it, but we want to be as prepared as we possibly.
So what are you doing in the meantime? If I can ask this, then how are you? I'm assuming you're still having some sort of, or you're going to need to do some sort of practices and run-throughs.
We had a Zoom meeting online. About a month ago, maybe?
Ran through the whole script
and did a read through of the aura. A lot of people were doing their lines from memory. I go through my lines I try and do it every 2 days. And I've noticed that maybe 2-3 weeks ago that I kind of dropped it down a bit and was maybe doing it every 5 days. And I was amazed at how they just started disappearing. And I couldn't remember them nearly so well. So I picked it up and started doing them every 2 days again.
When the cast knows that we're going to be rehearsing for 6 days before we reopen the show.
Okay.
We're gonna get back together and basically start back at tech. And say, okay, here's tech. Let's start to clean up. I'm of the belief that this stuff will come back very quickly.
Absolutely.
Particularly when we're in the physical space, in the costumes, with all of the cardboard props, I think it will come back very quickly.
I agree.
But luckily, I have a cast that are professional and dedicated to their work, so I know they're working on it. We'll have at least one more, or maybe 2 more get-togethers via Zoom between now and then to go through the lines. I have someone who took some footage for me of the original production. So we also have a video of that production.
I also have some audio from some of the shows.
So we can listen and look back at what we've got. So I'm confident that we'll be able to bring it back. It'll be in a different space. It'll be in a larger space. But it's actually the space where we created it. It's where we initially did the rehearsals. Yeah. So we're back in business, and we're very, very excited about it.
So Simon, is there going to be any difference that you'll bring to the character now that you're kind of been away from it, and now you got to kind of go back into that dark space again? I mean, is that going to be?
Yeah, if anything, I mean, there won't be major changes, but there's a few really nasty little things I've thought of to do to Rosemary. So
You have a few little surprises for us.
Yeah, afraid so.
Well, that's great.
By the way, I think I still have your dress. I think I need to get it dry cleaned.
Okay, yes, please do. It'll be. I'm actually sad that didn't happen a couple of months ago, because it's probably extremely smelly by now.
Yeah,
I sweat quite a bit in this show.
Oh, yeah, you're moving all over the place, and it's very intense.
It's quite a show.
It's quite a show. I am so glad that you're going to get to do it, and I'm
Yeah,
glad
me too.
that you got to make that big announcement tonight and let everyone know. And you may have to book another weekend. You may get such a great response.
I wish, frankly, we would run longer and go later if we could, but the good news is that some of my cast have been accepted to really great graduates programs, so they have to in August. So that's kind of why we have our deadline. I decided I'm not going to do the show with a different cast.
Yes. Well, that's what I was worried about, because, being that this is such, later that you were able to get everybody was able to come back. And
Well, it's not like we're all, busy with other shows. Not at the moment. So.
And this show was built so organically by and for this particular group of actors that I can't bring someone else in and try to squeeze them into whatever mold another person had established, because it won't. We would need to start over, and we just don't have the time.
And especially since you had created such chemistry, everybody has such chemistry, and that's what made that show.
So if people want to know more about the live concert streaming on Facebook on the 24th, if you just go in Facebook and just search Marat Saad live in concert, it will pop up and you'll see the event page for it.
Okay. Anything else you'd like to say about the upcoming production other than cover the URL when it is?
We were all so devastated when the show had to close. And we swore to ourselves then and there that would not be the end of the show. And that's a very easy thing to say. And it's another thing to make happen. But I've managed to keep my crew and all 13 actors, hanging on and saying, yes, we'll do it. And that's a testament to their dedication to their work. So definitely wouldn't have been able to do this without a bunch of people saying, and just seeing what happens.
Well, I'm glad you're going to make it happen. I think a lot of people will not be disappointed.
I can't wait to see Simon in his cute little black shoes.
They're gold. My shoes are gold.
I'm sorry, they're the gold pumps.
You directed the play. You should know this.
They were gold because they brought out the gold that was in the skirt.
Yes.
And the eyeshadow too.
Mm-hmm.
We can thank Victoria Bender for our costumes for that.
I thought it was great costuming, and I thought that was like I said, it was a great last show. Because it was so memorable and it was so enjoyable.
I appreciate that. And I appreciate those who came out, because we were already getting into kind of shut down territory, and a lot of people took the risk. They're like, all right, let's go see this thing while we still can. And I was really pleased at the number of people that did come and support that first run, because we're having a blast.
Well, I'm glad, and we're going to get to see it again. So, everyone, thank you so
So you
much.
guys know, we'll put the links up when we post the video on the website as well.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you so much for being here and talking about the show because I can't gush enough about it. So
Well, thank you very much. It was,
Thank you very much.
And it was
great
good
fun.
to see you,
It
Simon.
was great to
Yep.
talk with
Simon,
you.
it was great to see you and talk with you, chat with you, because I have admired your work for a while, and so it was kind of
Thank you.
this was very enjoyable for me.
Great. Thank you very much. I enjoyed it too.
Thanks, Lauren.
Thank you. Sorry for some of the weird tech issues going on tonight, but
It's always good to see your face.
I was trying to sort through some paperwork while I was listening, so very fun. But thank you guys for doing this. Thank you, Kim, for doing the interview. And I hope to see the show this time.
See you there.
Please come. Please come.
Yeah.
I should be there. Well, thank you guys, and tune in tomorrow at noon. I'll be with Amy Kirk Jones. Tomorrow at 7, I'll be with Edward Medina, and it should be another fun-filled day. So thanks, guys.
Bye,
Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Stay safe.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks, everyone, for watching.